Time it is, time for KP's Video News. That's right, KP's Video News, y'all. KP's Video News. Time for the news. Time for the news, y'all.
That's right, it's time for the news, y'all. And this is another follow-up on the AHMAUD ARBERY case coming out of Georgia. And it's like they got a long history of hate, racism, cover-ups, no justice for anybody else except white folks down in Georgia. So we got to watch this case carefully. On with this story, said when the Glenn County Police Department arrived at the scene of a fatal shooting in February in southern Georgia, officers encountered a former colleague with the victim's blood on his hands. They took down his version of events and let him and his son, who had fired the shots, go home. Later that day, Wanda Cooper, the mother of the 25-year-old victim, AHMAUD ARBERY, received a call from a police investigator. She recounted that the investigator said her son had been involved in a burglary and was killed by the homeowner. An inaccurate version of what happened. More than 2 months after that fatal confrontation, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, which took over the case this week, arrested the former officer Gregory McMichael and his son Travis McMichael on charges of murder and aggravated assault. The charges, which came after the release of the graphic video, showed the killing of the two white men confront Mr. Arbery, who was African American, made clear the deaths of the local department's bungling of the case, which was just the latest in a series of troubling episodes involving its officers. And it's one element of the broader potential breakdown of the justice system in southern Georgia. Attorney General Chris Carr, through a spokesperson, said on Friday that he planned to start a review of all the relevant players in that system. Mr. Carr's office has already determined that George E. Barnhill, a district attorney who was assigned to the case in February but recused himself late last month, should have never taken it on. Among his many conflicts, his son once worked alongside one of the suspects at the local prosecutor's office. S. Lee Merritt, a lawyer representing the Arbery family, has called for a federal civil rights investigation focused not only on the men who pursued Mr. Arbery, but the broader justice system. It's a small town America, Mr. Merritt said in an interview on Thursday. Those counties, the law enforcement community, they know each other well. They recycle officers in between themselves. It's a very tight-knit community. Over the years, Glenn County police officers have been accused of covering up allegations of misconduct, tampering with the crime scenes, interfering with the investigations of a police shooting, and retaliating against fellow officers who cooperated with outside investigators. The police chief, who was indicted days after Mr. Arbery's killing on charges related to an alleged cover-up of an officer's sexual relationship with the informant, the chief, John Powell, had been hired to clean up the department, which the Glenn County manager described last fall as suffering from poor training, outdated police policies, and a culture of cronyism. The Glenn County force was sort of the department where disciplinary records went missing and where evidence room standards were not maintained, leading to a state to strip it of its accreditation. Mr. Arbery was killed after the McMichaels confronted him while he was running and jogging through the Satilla Shores neighborhood just outside of Brunswick in Glenn's county seat. But neither of the McMichaels was arrested immediately after the slaying, which occurred on February 23rd, about 1 p.m. According to the police report, McMichael said that he saw Mr. Arbery running through his neighborhood and thought he looked like the suspect in a rash of recent break-ins. Mr. McMichael, 64, told authorities that he and his son, Travis McMichael, 34, armed themselves and began chasing him in a truck. However, according to the report, the last break-in in that area that had occurred was back in January of 2020. January 2020, and this happened in February, at the end of February. So they lied. They said that it's been a recent rash of break-ins. So it's like it was no rash of break-ins. They had one break-in, and that was back in January. So all right, on with the story. Greg McMichael had been a Glenn County police officer from 1992 to 89, and later worked as an investigator in the local prosecutor's office before retiring last year. Darren Penn, a lawyer and a department critic, said the AHMAUD ARBERY case was another symptom of a sign of a police department that appears willing to protect those they know. Mr. Penn is representing a woman who is suing the department over claims that it failed to intervene with her estranged son-in-law, a Glenn County officer who killed her daughter, a friend and himself in 2018. County officials and the police spokesman could not be reached on Friday for comment. From the start, Mr. McMichael's connections to the police department and the prosecutor's office presented other challenges. The first district attorney in the case, Jackie Johnson, recused herself because she had worked with Mr. McMichael. The second prosecutor, Mr. Barnhill, advised Glenn County Police that there was insufficient probable cause to issue arrest warrants according to the internal document. Finally, the case moved to Tom Durden, district attorney in Georgia Atlantic's Judicial in Hinesville, Georgia, who this week formally asked the State Bureau of Investigation to get involved, according to GBI's statement. A Justice Department spokesperson said this week that the FBI was assisting in that investigation. Bob Coleman, a county commissioner at large, was critical of Ms. Johnson, saying that she should have given the case to the state's attorney general, not Mr. Barnhill, after the Georgia Bureau of Investigation made arrests this week. Mr. Coleman said that's what should have happened a long time ago before the sun went down. They killed a person in the bright sunlight. Glenn County is a marshy coastal corner of Georgia, about 300 miles southeast of Atlanta, with about 85,000 residents, and is known mostly for its mellow barrier islands and its rich African-American coastal culture. Like many southern communities, its history is studded with racial violence, including the late 19th century lynchings. Today, the county is about 70% white, 27% black, according to census figures. On Friday, hundreds gathered under the moss-draped trees outside of Glenn County Courthouse to protest, arguing that the handling of the case has been botched. As many months went by without charges. I would never call the Glenn County Police to my house, one of Mr. Arbery's aunt said. Mario Briggs, a longtime resident of Brunswick, said that he believed that race was a factor in Mr. Arbery's killing, given the unfair treatment black men have long received. The black man is an endangered species, Mr. Baggs, 46, said. We need justice, we need relief, and we need the world to pay attention. Yet he also believed that Mr. Arbery's case fit into a larger pattern of dysfunction. Over the last decade, the Glenn County Police Department, which has 122 officers, has faced at least 17 lawsuits, including allegations of illegal search and seizure. One suit accused the department of wrongfully killing an unarmed white woman after officers fired through her car windshield. An investigation into that shooting found that Glenn County officers had tried to interfere with the inquiry to protect the officers involved. One of the officers in that shooting later killed his estranged wife and a friend. His wife's mother accused the police of ignoring several alarming encounters in the months before the killings. Mr. Powell, the police chief, was arrested this year along with 3 other department officials after investigation into a disbanded narcotics task force. The inquiry found that Mr. Powell had actively tried to shield wrongdoing by the task force that led to his indictment on charges including violating the oath of office, criminal attempt to commit a felony, and influencing a witness. As details of Mr. Arbery's death slowly emerged and were reported in the Brunswick News, Mr. Arbery's mother, increasingly distraught, called the department. She said that she had been told one thing, but the newspaper had reported something else entirely. Ms. Cooper's faith was shaken. It's hard when you can't really believe what the police tell you. When you cannot believe the people that's supposed to look out for all people, and when you question that, it's not a good feeling. Attempts to reach Gregory Michael late last month were unsuccessful. In a brief phone conversation last month, Travis Michael, who runs a company that that gives custom boat tours declined to comment, citing a continuing investigation. The two men made a brief appearance at Glenn County Magistrate Office on Friday afternoon, but court officials said they did not enter a plea. No information about their lawyers was immediately available. Questions about the handling of Ms. Arbery's case extend beyond the police department and Mr. Barnhill, the prosecutor who told the police that there was insufficient probable cause to arrest Mr. McMichaels. In an email, Mr. Barnhill wrote to the State Attorney General's office on April 7th. He asked to be taken off the case, stating his son and assistant district attorney in the Brunswick prosecutor's office had handled a felony probation revocation case involving Mr. Arbery. He also said Greg McMichael had helped with the previous prosecution of Arbery. The plot thickens. Court records show that Mr. Arbery was convicted of shoplifting and of violating probation in 2018, according to the local news report. He was indicted 5 years earlier for taking a handgun to a basketball game. Mr. Barnhill's office most recently drew attention beyond South Georgia for his prosecution of a black woman in a rural Coffee County who had helped a first-time voter use a voting machine in 2012 election. In 2018, a jury found the woman not guilty of multiple felonies. Her lawyers called the case a racially motivated targeted prosecution. Peter Murphy, a Glenn County commissioner, on Friday defended the police department's decision to make no arrests in the shooting of Mr. Arbery. Mr. Murphy said the agency had been advised not to make arrests by both Mr. Barnhill and officials at the office of Ms. Johnson, the district attorney in Brunswick, who formally asked to be taken off the case 4 days after the shooting. Neither prosecutor could be reached for comment. Tell me what the agency did wrong when its men and women were told several times not to arrest anyone, Mr. Murphy said, referring to the police. What were we supposed to do? Cuff these guys and walk them into jail and have no one prosecute them? Rick Rojas reported from Brunswick, Georgia. And this is crazy, man. It's just like crazy situation. It keeps spiraling, and it's the story's getting bigger and bigger and deeper, and it's just really crazy. It's really crazy. You know, here's another case where you got another cop that did something stupid, and this was this cop here. Where was this cop located? This cop here was in South Carolina. The detention officer at Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center in Columbia faces charges in the assault of an inmate. Carla Greer, 26, was arrested when she turned herself in. Sheriff Leon Lott confirmed. Deputies learned of a report from an inmate who said he was attacked by a guard on April 11th when Greer was on duty. An investigation uncovered evidence of Greer hitting the inmate several times in the face and neck area before pushing him to the ground. There was no clear reason for the attack, deputies said. Greer is now being held at Alvin S. Glenn on charges of assault and third-degree battery. And this is a female that works in the men's detention center. And so she beat up one of the inmates there. And then here's my last story on this particular episode. It said a bank cannot store your drugs for you, sir. And this is crazy. A man has been arrested after allegedly attempting to deposit 2 bags of cocaine along with some cash into a Colorado bank. The Jefferson County Sheriff's Office said that David Pangalo, 34, was visiting a local bank in the 8300 block of Continental Divide Road when he pulled into the drive-thru to deposit cash. When the drive-thru bank teller opened up the tube from Pangalo, they reportedly found 2 bags of cocaine mixed in with the cash. The bank teller contacted the local authorities, who arrived at the scene to take Pangalo into police custody. Further investigation into the incident revealed Pangalo did not mean to deposit the cocaine, cops said. Authorities said Pangelo was formally booked after they discovered additional drugs in his car. He was released from police custody pending charges. Additional drugs were located in his car, and he was booked through the pending charges. The department then cautioned residents against using drugs irresponsibly. And the moral of the story is don't do drugs. Also, the bank cannot store your drugs for you. Boy, I'm telling you, there's a bunch of idiots out here today try to deposit his drugs, cocaine into the bank for safekeeping. What do they think of next? What do they think of next? I'm telling you, what do they think of next?
Video news, y'all. That's right, it's time for KP's video news, y'all. KP's video
That's right.
news, y'all.
KP's video news.